For over a year, it was just rumors, flying around. It was just so many different scenarios popping up about what the possibilities could be. And to think that it was all about greed, that's what really frightened everyone.
Here's a Black woman who's operating a successful business. For someone like that to meet this sort of fate, it just felt so wrong to a lot of people.
If the killer did come in through the front door, then he'd be caught on camera.
Everybody was talking about it.
I heard the boyfriend.
Was it a setup? Was it a hit?
This case was completely a whodunit. We really had no idea.
My sister was saying, there's a killer among us. And I thought she was crazy, but she was right.
Chicago emergency, Hicks.
Yeah.
Oh, caller, I can't hear you. I just hear.
Need ambulance.
And what's happening there?
Some shooting, please.
How many shots did you hear fired, sir?
I don't know. Someone.
Try to give me an approximate, sir.
I don't know. 6, 7, 8.
Okay, that's good. I'll get that information over to police, sir.
But what time are they coming? Someone is here dying.
Violence is no stranger in Chicago, but this call comes from a place many consider a haven from the storm, including veteran detective John Carolus and Sergeant Michelle Wood.
When we arrived at the crime scene, it actually wasn't what I had expected.
The building's a newer apartment building, high-rise, in a nice part of town, uptown. We go upstairs to the 4th floor. There's a corner unit.
To John is she might have been killed in her sleep.
She had a gunshot wound to her head and multiple stab wounds to her chest.
We noticed the fact that there was a hole in the wall that was created by a gunshot. It went through the headboard and into the drywall and back of it. When you arrive at a crime scene, someone's deceased. Sometimes they're shot and sometimes they're stabbed, but they're never shot and stabbed. It's overkill.
It was very strange. Whoever did this to her was very brutal.
The victim is identified as 45-year-old Yolanda Holmes. She is a much-loved resident of the building and the owner of a popular local hair salon. As the CSI unit processes the scene, detectives are filled in on the attack's second victim. Earlier that morning, a man called 911.
I'll get that information over to police, sir.
But what time are they coming? Someone is here dying.
When first responders arrived, they found the caller suffering from stab wounds to his head and hands. He was taken to the hospital and is expected to survive. Detectives must wait to talk to him, but someone else appears on the scene they need to speak to, Yolanda's son, 22-year-old Kwame Wilson.
So someone notified Kwame about what happened, and he arrived on scene.
He was a salon kid, and his mom did hair, and she, kept his hair looking good. He had aspirations of being an actor, of being a rapper.
That's how we do kids. You need a community to raise them, and he was our community child, our shop baby. That's what we used to call him, the shop baby. Everybody rallied around Kwame. I thought he handled it very well because everyone grieves differently. Nobody could believe that someone would kill Yolanda.
I was so shocked. I was like, this is not real. This is not real. We were really, really confused. There was a lot of rumors flying around.
I mean, well, anytime there's a tragedy, I don't care if you went in the grocery store, the barber shop, this shop, any shop, the store, everybody was talking about it. The first thing we thought, did she get robbed or did somebody stick up the salon? And then we heard it happened in her home, and it was rumors about maybe her boyfriend. It was just all type of speculations going on.
We've learned that you can't always trust gossip because they're all half-truths,
Most crimes that occur within the city of Chicago, when the detectives arrive on scene, they have an idea of what might have happened. And in this particular situation, we really had no idea. This was a mystery.
It's been a long day at the crime scene, but effective, as the effort has led to a decent collection of evidence for detectives to work with.
In the hallway, there was bunches of money.
So was this a robbery that went wrong? There was a pair of earbuds that appeared to be bloody.
We sent that earbud to the crime lab for DNA testing.
What we were looking for, obviously, is a gun and a knife because she was shot and she was stabbed. So we located a handgun, a revolver that was likely the murder weapon, and it was damaged where it basically shattered and the cylinder came out.
Unfortunately, the revolver is too bloody to lift usable fingerprints.
We also located a knife block. And when we were trying to figure out what kind of knife created the wound in her chest, I said, that's a paring knife, and that's a paring knife that's missing in the kitchen.
The detective's next move is to search the outside of the apartment complex.
The building is a very secure building because you need to go through 2 locked entries to make entry inside the residence.
We found video cameras on the outside of the building, facing the sidewalk, facing the front entrance.
Opposite the main entrance to the building, underneath the elevated railway tracks, the detectives notice a passageway.
This would have been the first alley we could have possibly walked down and disposed of the evidence. These dumpsters were full of garbage.
We had to systematically go through every single dumpster because I wasn't going to leave the murder weapon here. If there was a chance we could find it, we were going to find it.
We knew the next day was garbage day, and all this garbage would have been collected. But we never did find the knife.
Frustrated, detectives return to the crime scene. Waiting for them is the male victim of the attack, a man claiming to be Yolanda's off-and-on boyfriend, Curtis.
Curtis has sustained a major injury, a gash to his head and his hands as well.
The blood in the hallway ended up being Curtis's blood.
Curtis was the only person who survived this traumatic home invasion murder. So he's the only one who can tell us exactly what happened.
That evening, they had gone out for drinks, and they ended up back at her apartment. He said they were intimate, and then they fell asleep.
Curtis told Michelle and I he was sleeping in bed with Yolanda, and he was awoken by a gunshot. Bang. He woke up and he saw a gunman standing at the door, firing a gun.
And at some point, he becomes involved in an altercation with this unknown person who had shot Yolanda.
There were a lot of things about what he said that didn't make sense. There was no forced entry to the door. It was very strange that Curtis wasn't killed as well.
Everything Curtis did was unusual and suspicious. And we said, Curtis, what happened? What happened here? And he kept telling me, he's like, you're the detective, you tell me.
18 hours after her murder, Yolanda Holmes's killer is still on the loose. And so far, investigators have very little to work with, aside from their suspicions.
We know that Curtis was involved in an altercation. Whether it was an altercation that was staged to make it look like something that it wasn't, we don't know.
Could the answer to what happened inside Yolanda's apartment lie within the building?
It was great to see that the building was full of cameras and we can verify what Curtis was saying.
Or her tight-knit circle of friends.
Whoever came inside and killed Yolanda was likely someone she knew. Family members, friends, boyfriends, everyone's a suspect.
Yolanda's death wasn't your typical gangland murder or dispute that played out on the streets.
The community was on edge. I was on edge. People looked over their shoulders. Something's not right here.
"18 hours after Yolanda's murder, rumors are spreading through her upscale Chicago neighborhood. Curiosity is all part of human nature, but it makes detectives John Carolus and Michelle Wood's job that much harder.
We were most concerned with the people who lived downstairs. We figured if anyone heard an altercation or a fight, it would be them.
The apartment complex has around 150 units spread over 7 floors.
Everyone was reluctant to talk to us. No one talks to the police. We just kept coming back, and the neighbors downstairs totally didn't want to talk to us, but we wouldn't give up. So we talked to the female neighbor who lived downstairs, and it was directly underneath Yolanda, and she said that she thought she heard a chair fall during the middle of the night, but I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. We were hoping for a little bit more than that.
We canvassed the building. It was a single gunshot that hit Yolanda, but there was additional gunshots, we believe, that hit the headboard and hit the wall. We canvassed the building and all the units surrounding Yolanda's apartment. Nobody heard the gunshots, which was kind of surprising.
Was someone being reluctant because they were uncomfortable talking with us, or did they have something to hide?
As detectives Wood and Carolus work their way through the building, they learned that those who knew Yolanda have assumptions of their own.
I always thought it was the boyfriend. I couldn't think of no one else.
As far as the rumor, I heard the boyfriend, Curtis. And I was believing it because I've heard about some situations, altercation they had before.
I thought Yolanda had been set up. That's what I thought, by someone close to her, and I thought it was the boyfriend. Their relationship was very volatile.
We learned from Yolanda's family that she had a party months before and that she got into a fight with Curtis and they broke it off then.
Some kind of argument ensued over Curtis being jealous, and the police were actually called to the scene, and he was escorted out of the residence.
So I'm like, oh my goodness, was that his revenge? Was he that humiliated that he would do that to her?
It's a huge red flag, because if he had been violent with her in the past, who's to say that he wasn't violent with her now?
In order to prove or disprove Curtis's story about an intruder, detectives want to get their hands on all surveillance footage recorded in Yolanda's building.
In Yolanda's part of her building, there's basically only one way to get in there, and it's through the front door.
If the killer did come in through the front door and leave, as Curtis told us, then he'd be caught on camera.
The person who controls the surveillance footage is the building's superintendent, Mr. Darrell.
Mr. Darrell is the only person in the building that has access to every single apartment, including access to the entry inside the building. So it's a thought, did someone gain access from Mr. Darrell?
According to the other tenants, Mr. Darrell is always around keeping a watchful eye. They say there is nothing he isn't aware of.
The night that Yolanda Holmes was murdered, Mr. Darrell was not home.
Detectives ask Mr. Darrell to play the tape, starting an hour before the 911 call made at 4:47 a.m.
It's very early in the morning, so there's not a lot of people going in and out of the building.
The entranceway to the building is deserted until around 4:30 a.m.
We can see a strange figure walking up to the door.
It looked like someone picked up their stuff from the dry cleaning and got some detergent and was coming home from a long day of work.
He was wearing lots of clothing, multiple layers of clothing, which was odd because it was still end of summer and it was very hot outside. It was clear from all the clothing they was wearing and the way he was hoodied up, that he was trying to avoid the cameras and hide his identity from the cameras.
About 5 minutes after the unidentified individual enters, the camera records another person leaving. They're of similar height and build of the first. And as they exit, they're passed by another man. All this happens 10 minutes before the 911 call.
Mr. Darrell 100% was trying to protect the person that was entering the residence. Mr. Darrell was suspicious. He obviously didn't trust me, and because he didn't trust me, I didn't trust him.
I immediately, when I saw the footage, I knew exactly who he was. Ironically, he lived on the same floor as Yolanda. They wanted me to immediately contact him. They wanted to know what unit he lived in. So they had some concern. What really hurt me or affected me the way it did, for you to think that I had something to do with this and I wasn't even here is disturbing to me. I just can't believe that you actually thought that this is something that I would be capable of. That feeling stayed with me for a while.
Everyone jumped to conclusions, is it this person, it's that person, it was a black man, it was a white man, it's just sad. Statistics say about 70% of the people, that get murdered is by somebody they know.
Everybody was suspect, so I heard a lot of different things about maybe this person did it or maybe that person did it. Yolanda was very smart, very private, not very trusting of people. I knew that it had to be somebody that she allowed to be in her inner circle.
No first entry, it's somebody she knew. That's what we came up with. Someone she knew, she let the person in and just took her life.
Mr. Darrell agrees to set up a meeting between Sergeant Wood and the young man he recognized on the surveillance footage, named Michael.
Michael, at the time, was a tenant that lived in the building with his grandmother. And I had the opportunity of mentoring him in regards to his career, focusing on what he was going to do after graduation. I had to contact him. I contacted his grandmother. She panicked. Oh, dear Mr. Darrell, what's going on? We heard that there's something going on in the building. She asked me, Mr. Darrell, do they think that Mike had something to do with this? No, ma'am, they don't. But, you know, I'm sure she thought that. And so with me telling her, no, ma'am, they don't, she released it and relaxed. But clearly, she had to have felt some kind of way. He would not come out of the home or his apartment because he didn't feel safe. And not only did he not feel safe, the majority of the people that lived on that floor didn't either, because no one had really told them exactly what had happened.
Speaking to Michael, detectives are able to clear him of any involvement in Yolanda's murder. Next, they push him for a description of the man he passed in the doorway.
Our next question was, did you see this guy? Was he covered in blood? Did he say anything to you? Did he threaten you? And Michael really couldn't provide much information for us. No one was above suspicion. Everyone in this story had a secret, and a lot of it didn't have anything to do with the case, but that's why it was so hard to break the wall.
The only thing detectives know for sure is that the surveillance footage isn't lying to them. They just can't figure out what it's saying.
I watched this video 50 times already. My partner, John, watched the video 100 times. And what we were looking for were little details.
It's in the little details that several seemingly innocent things jump out. The man walks into the building wearing earbuds.
And when he's walking out, one of the headphones is missing. On the crime scene, we found a white earbud from headphones with a cord still attached.
It means it's likely that this man was in Yolanda's apartment.
Certain bits of surveillance video captured the offender wearing what looked like a Adidas jacket. And it had stripes down the side. But on the way out, the jacket he had on didn't have any stripes. And we also noticed the fact that he looks like he changed his shoes.
There's one other detail that stands out. Before he enters the building, he uses the intercom to gain access.
So who let the killer inside the building?
A week after Yolanda Holmes's murder, the popular 45-year-old Chicago hair salon owner is laid to rest.
A lot of her friends and colleagues, pretty much filled the place. I did not see Curtis there. Kwame, I gave him a hug at the funeral. And I told him, I said, I loved your mom. I love Yolanda. She really stuck her neck out for me. I just wanted you to know that.
There were a lot of suspicions and rumors that there was much more to this story than police or journalists or anybody was willing to say on the record.
Studying surveillance footage from Yolanda's apartment building, Chicago homicide detectives Michelle Wood and John Carolus have discovered an unidentified young man they believe is involved in the murder.
And it supported Curtis's story that a gunman entered the apartment and shot her.
But what it doesn't do is fully clear Yolanda's on-again boyfriend, Curtis, of suspicion.
Curtis told us that after he finished fighting with the offender and the offender walked away, that he immediately called 911.
The call is placed at 4:47 a.m., roughly 10 minutes after the suspect is seen leaving the building.
There's a delay between the time that the offender walked out of Yolanda's apartment that we can see on video and the time that the 911 call was placed.
Everyone gives us a story, and we're trying to figure out if the story is the truth or if it's a lie.
To confirm Curtis's recall of events, detectives must identify the figure in the footage. To do this, they focus on the place where Yolanda spent most of her time, her hair salon.
Yolanda was a well-known member of the community. She owned a successful business in the neighborhood. She participated in a lot of community events, so everyone knew her.
There, detectives learn Yolanda's ex-husband, the father to her son Kwame, has a violent past.
She definitely had a secret. I don't know if people didn't know about her ex-husband or if people just didn't want to talk about it.
Yolanda's ex-husband was a former gang chief who was doing hard time for killing 2 people.
Was someone mad at what her ex-husband did, and now they were coming after her to get retribution for what happened?
People were saying, was it a setup? Was it a hit? Or was it jealousy? You know, it was just so many different scenarios popping up about what the possibilities could be.
The rumor mill was definitely at play here. Though she was a businesswoman now, she had connections with people who were from, I think, a darker element in the city.
We all felt like it was a killer on the loose, and everybody had to, you know, be careful and watch their surroundings, try to walk in groups, and different things that you hear when there is a murder or a robbery or a rape in a community.
Over the subsequent weeks, the detectives tirelessly work every possible lead on the case.
We had a black revolver in the bedroom floor that was in pieces. We had the earbud in the hallway.
We had the earbuds tested for DNA. It was entered into CODIS, which is the nationwide database for DNA. There were no hits.
The detectives also tried to speak to Yolanda's ex, but he refuses.
If we go to a facility and attempt to talk to an inmate, if they don't want to talk to us, we're not talking to them.
Weeks turn into months, and with the anniversary of Yolanda's death looming, the close-knit uptown community is growing frustrated.
I think that there is a finality that people are seeking when you talk about murders, especially of people who we feel did not deserve what they got. With so much time passed and the feeling that justice hasn't been served, suspicions fill the gaps.
One question puzzling detectives throughout the investigation is how the intruder gained access to Yolanda's apartment.
Because of the fact that we knew that whoever entered her residence gained entry from either her or Curtis, we needed their cell phone records because we needed to figure out if they let the killer in.
In the fall of 2013, a year after Yolanda's murder, the records are finally released, revealing something previously unknown.
Cell phone studies are not done the way people think that they're done. Back then, what I would get is I'd get, a stack of cell phone records this big, and I have to go through every single one. And we eventually ordered location of phone calls made. And back then, this isn't the way it is now, they would give you latitude and longitude. So I would have to type that into the computer in Google Maps and get an idea of where these phone calls were being made. It's not like you ask for location and it's like, oh, it's over here on the corner of these 2 streets. That's not how it worked at all. So these cell phone records it took hours upon hours upon hours to even figure out. When you send a text message, it comes up one way and there's a code. It goes to voicemail, there's a code, and then you have a list of codes you have to look at. So even looking at one phone and doing the history on it is just hours and hours and hours. I ran Curtis every which way you can possibly imagine. Curtis's cell phone records had nothing. Yolanda did have other phones. She had a landline, and I actually requested cell phone records from the landline. It was one of those phones that was pretty much only there for emergency and to get buzzed into the building.
The records confirm that the building's intercom called Yolanda's landline around 4:30 a.m. It does not say if it was answered.
She had 2 cell phones that were listed to her under a certain account. There was one particular number on Yolanda's second line that kept appearing Before the murder, during the murder, and shortly thereafter, and then never again. We had to figure out who that number belonged to.
A year after the murder of Yolanda Holmes, Chicago's uptown community where she lived and worked remains restless. Knowing her killer is still on the streets is a killer, but they certainly haven't stopped searching. And now, with access to Yolanda's cell phone records, Sergeant Wood hopes she's close to finding a vital clue. On a second cell phone owned by Yolanda, an unknown number called multiple times in the moments leading up to her murder.
We were trying to figure out who that phone number belonged to. So I did run a subscriber information search on that phone number, and it came back to a person named Eugene Spencer. Eugene Spencer is similar height and weight as the person that we have on surveillance video. We ended up running Eugene in our department database and located an address.
A background check reveals Eugene has a prior criminal history. In December 2013, detectives bring Eugene to the station for questioning.
I asked Eugene if he'd ever been to the residence of where Yolanda was killed. And he's like, oh, you talking about that lady that got killed? Yeah. He's like, up, huh? And he seemed to know the location of the building and where it was, but he denied being there.
Sergeant Wood continues putting pressure on Eugene.
And I said, you were there. And he's like, oh, you're talking about with the clothes and with the detergent? So he obviously knows what I'm talking about.
The one thing we had was the DNA evidence from the earbuds that were left on scene. It was his DNA.
Faced with irrefutable proof that he was in Yolanda's apartment, Eugene's story crumbles.
Initially, Eugene denied any involvement in the murder of Yolanda Holmes. Then he admitted to participating in a robbery.
Then, Eugene admits that during the robbery attempt, he shot Yolanda.
And in my head, I'm like, what? Is he really admitting this? We talked to him for about an hour, and he completely, 100% confessed to the murder.
But there's something about Eugene's confession that doesn't ring true.
We now knew that Eugene was involved in the murder of Yolanda Holmes, but what we didn't know is how he got into the building and how he got into Yolanda's residence. How did Eugene get into the building?
I was at a state of shock and disbelief. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I mean, I'm still shocked.
I mean, out of this world, crazy, stupid, senseless. You know what I mean? It makes no sense.
You know what, to be totally honest, I will never understand it. It's just unbelievable. You know, still, after all these years, you know, you still just don't believe it.
It's taken them a year, but Chicago detectives Michelle Wood and John Carolus believe they have found the person who shot Yolanda Holmes.
We now knew that Eugene was involved in the murder of Yolanda Holmes, but one troubling fact that I needed the answer to was, how did Eugene get into the building?
Sergeant Wood presses Eugene to explain who gave him access to Yolanda's apartment.
During the year and some that it took to close this murder, everyone was pointing the finger at everyone else. Everyone was suspicious of everyone else.
The team of dedicated detectives is on the verge of finding out the truth.
I had every person that was involved in Yolanda's life pointing the finger at someone else. And we couldn't figure it out. And the person that actually did it was the person that was basically right under your nose.
Caught and cheated out of his cut, Eugene tells detectives what really happened on the night of September 2nd, 2012.
Eugene laid out the story in 45 minutes, and then everything fell into place.
The person who put this thing together, the architect of everything, was her son, Kwame. Kwame actually provided Eugene the weapon, which was a revolver handgun. He gave him the clothing on the hanger, he gave him the detergent, and he told him to walk inside the building and act like you belong there.
22-year-old Kwame then calls Eugene, using a cell phone listed to Yolanda.
She had 2 cell phones that were listed to her under a certain account. One of those phones belonged to her son.
Eugene explains that the entire time, he's on the phone with Kwame.
The headphones that we see on video, Eugene Spencer was talking to Kwame live.
Earlier in the evening, Kwame warns Yolanda that he would be coming home late.
Eugene buzzed her apartment. Kwame said, if you cough, she'll think it's me. So she said, who is it? And he said, so she buzzes him in. She goes to the front and unlocks the door of her residence, and she goes back to bed. Eugene enters the apartment, walks inside, goes to the room, because he's been told exactly how to get into her room, and he shoots her in the head.
After he shoots Yolanda in the head, Kwame tells Eugene, make sure that is dead.
So Eugene then goes into the kitchen and gets a knife from the knife block.
Before Eugene can return to the bedroom, Yolanda's boyfriend Curtis confronts him. A fight breaks out in the hallway, during which Curtis is stabbed. Then, Eugene hits Curtis with the handgun, shattering the cylinder.
What we didn't realize is Curtis's statements of what occurred were so inconcise because he actually was knocked unconscious. So his memory lapse makes complete sense.
In a rage, Eugene returns to the bedroom and stabs the already deceased Yolanda in the chest.
Eugene was furious at Kwame. He thought that Kwame knew that Curtis was there and that Kwame set up Eugene to get killed.
Eugene's story turns the entire case on its head.
Curtis would call the station and he's like, when are you gonna make the arrest of the offender? And everyone thought he was gonna be the person that was charged.
Everything Curtis was telling us was right on.
Curtis is completely cleared of any involvement in Yolanda's murder.
The woman that he loved was killed next to him.
As the detectives dig into Kwame's life, they learn that he'd recently been laid off from work, and his mother cut him off from her purse. Desperate to maintain his flashy lifestyle, they believe he hatched a plan that would make him rich.
Kwame wanted her life insurance policy, the $90,000 cash she had inside the bank, her car, and anything else that was of value.
For his help, Kwame was willing to pay his friend.
Kwame Wilson offered Eugene Spencer $7,000 to kill his mother, but instead he only gave him $70,000.
In December 2013, 1 year and 3 months after Yolanda's murder, her son, Kwame, is asked to come to the police station.
Kwame and I talked for a while, and I could see he thought he was talking his way out of it.
That all changes when he learns his buddy, Eugene, has come completely clean.
At one point during the interrogation, Kwame and I are sitting in what one would think to be uncomfortable silence. And I just looked over at him and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Because this woman gave him everything he could have possibly ever wanted. There was no reason for him to kill her.
I do this for real, bro. I don't got no problem with giving back, man. I'm the only one out here with a show that's actually giving back, you feel me? And I got proof to show it, you feel me?
He profited from his mother's death, and what he did with the money was throw it into people that he called fans.
Kwame Wilson is charged with murder. He pleads not guilty, but receives a sentence of 99 years in jail. For his part, Eugene Spencer is sentenced to 100 years. News of the truth reverberates around Yolanda's tight-knit uptown Chicago community.
Same young man that picked up my daughter from daycare. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. But some of the words that's coming to my mind about him, I can't say.
Yolanda gave Kwame almost anything he wanted. Everything was in his name. She left everything to him. I guess he couldn't wait anymore.
Your own mother. She brought you into this world, dude. I mean, come on. How can you have the heart just to harm your mother?
All across the community, the loss of business owner Yolanda Holmes has reverberations.
The outcome of all of this, when you try to process it, is ultimate betrayal. I mean, I cannot believe that you would live a life that you lived and then turn around and betray the person that brought you into this world. It's heartbreaking, it's sad, and it's just disgusting. It's disgusting.
I think that the suspicion goes on because there are people who just don't want it to be true, that this young man masterminded, orchestrated his mother's death. And I think that because there's so much complexity in us, in our minds, that there is such suspicion when people do horrible things, because people surprise you.